Good morning. This is the office hour for Oregon State University PDC Pro Winter 2024. This is Zoom number 4, and the next lesson due is lesson 4, microclimates and current zones. Okay. We got a few folks in here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing, Jacob?
Oh, been so busy.
Yeah.
Tired. How are you?
Good. Good. I had my first retreat ever over the weekend in Malibu.
Yeah?
Yeah, that was kind of fun.
What sort of retreat?
It was actually a women's retreat. Yeah, it's a kind of a specialized group, and it was about 100 people. You know, a lot of yoga, art stuff, kind of just yeah. So it's
That
nice.
sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of go through a roller coaster, and at the end you're like, oh, I wish we had more days, but I'm exhausted and I need to go home and sleep. So really interesting site right up on a ridge. It's at the intersection of the Tongva and Chumash territory. So it actually used to be like kind of I think it's a combination of like sacred site kind of contention zone, but it's also now a Franciscan monastery. So it's got quite a storied history to it. So yeah. And a lot of eucalyptus, a lot of landsliding, a lot of like, you're driving through and like, whew, this feels like a firestorm waiting to happen. And everybody's like, oh, the nature, it's so beautiful. And I'm like, oh, the non-native trees. Yeah, you try not to be too cynical about that kind of thing in your own world. But hi, Linda.
Hello. Good to see you.
You too. Oh, Lucia, this is good. All right, you're just gonna let everybody filter in. See, Patricia's here.
So Jacob, are you the one that's in Colorado?
Yeah.
What part of Colorado?
Denver.
Okay, my daughter just is moving to Lyons.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'm going to be out there. Actually, I'm going to fly out there in April in time to go drive down with them to a solar eclipse festival. But they want me to plan their yard, and we might need somebody to help with that. So I'd like to connect. They're just moving on to a 45-acre piece in Lyons.
Okay.
So
yeah,
love to meet up or get some connections with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a quarry up there I like to go to, and it takes me about 45-50 minutes to get up to Lyons. So like that's fine. We can do that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we got like a 28-foot enclosed trailer for a reason on our, have trailer will travel.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well,
oh yeah, that'd be awesome. Cool.
I'm gonna go do some layout while I'm there in April, and then come back out in July to see if we can, or end of June, to get some things working for them.
Yeah, don't be afraid to pull me in for just like the layout, because I can help you with like local materials and things like that, as far as how we go to do it.
Okay.
Because where are you at?
I'm in Utah.
Okay, yeah,
area.
Yeah, you wouldn't know our local materials and all the stuff available to us.
No.
So yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you.
Nice. I love when you guys connect between yourselves and like start designing each other's properties. It's really fun. Awesome. Cool. Okay. Well, we got 4, which is probably what we're gonna get for today. How is everybody doing with things? Assignments. I've got a few emails. Jake, you're at the top of my screen. How are you doing? Busy?
Oh my God. Yeah. I'm like every day, 18 hours a day with these commercial bids. And
Mhm.
I've almost got the assignment that was already due done. Almost.
The second one, no, third. Pardon me, we're on the fourth.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
going to be a whole one behind. And then I go to Mexico for a week in March. So I'll end up a whole,
Yeah.
yeah.
The break helps. I just saw Dow answer somebody's question about what the actual dates of the break are. So let me check in on that.
Yeah.
Because that's helpful
So-
to know.
Sorry, how do we get to know, like, how would I get hold of Jacob? Like, is there a list of like people's names with phone numbers, or how would we do that?
There is not, you can share your contact info right here if you like. Good morning, Catherine. Do it through the discussion, however you like, but there's no like designated contact list, just so that, you know, if people want to be, sometimes people want to be confidential or for whatever
Right.
reason.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me check. I just saw this email come in because another student was asking. I have so many email folders, way too many. Here we go, regarding the break. Break coming up from March 18th to April 1st.
That'll give me I'll just work through the break and that'll give me the perfect time.
Yeah.
Fully catch up the 3 weeks I'm going to be behind is what I'm going to end up being.
Yeah, that a lot of students end up doing that. I do recommend getting, let me see, lesson 5 is a big one, like the water assignment. So like the soil assignment, lesson 6 is comparatively small, but I noticed quite a few students do get hung up on the water assignment, and then we often lose a lot of students at the break. So just keep that in mind. I mean, just keep it as a kind of a thought that like, oh, this is when most people drop off, and it's kind of a reason is there like it's a really big assignment, and then you go on break. So just kind of work through, and I'm going to be somewhat available through the break. I believe we're going to Canada. We may end up changing our trip, but we're probably going to be in Canada for most of that break, but I will still be available for the most part over it. So so you're welcome to reach out and yeah, ask questions or just get some support if you're working on stuff through the break. So,
Okay, so
Yeah.
you gave us the name, the dates, and I was paying attention to something else. So
it's March 18th to April 1st.
Okay.
So April 1st is a Monday.
Okay.
The 18th is, oh yeah, so it's a Monday to Monday.
Okay.
So Susan, nothing's due during that week? I haven't even looked at where it is in the
No,
cycle.
they're not due during the week. So your assignment is due, I believe it's due the 18th. Let me see. I just want to double check. Yes, there's a break coming up for March 18th when assignment 5 is due. And then April 1st, well, it'll actually be April 2nd because our Zoom meetings are on Tuesdays. So April 2nd, you'll have a Zoom meeting. So you really have you almost have a 3-week break because you've got, so April 2nd will be our next Zoom meeting after the break. And then your assignment will be due the following Monday. Cool.
So I think I joined us. I'm so sorry. My dog always barks when I'm online.
That's okay.
So if I understood correctly, I'm not the only person who's behind.
No,
So
not at all.
Actually gratifying because I just had a family thing came up unexpectedly, and so I've been sweating a little bit. But
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna just honestly, after it's kind of like a horse race. Lesson 1, everybody that's going to run the race pretty much jumps out the gate at the beginning at the same time. And then after that, it's not all bets are off, but like there's a bunch, like a handful of students that get through lesson 2 all on time, and then a smaller handful that get through lesson 3, and then that handful kind of just gets smaller and smaller, and then some people start catching up, towards the end, and then generally there's like a handful of students that like right at the end are like, oh, I'm on lesson 4 and I should be on lesson 8. I'm going to try and catch up and finish on time. And it's a big scramble. But no, after lesson 2, pretty much everybody's all running at their own speed. So it's nice. I think it's helpful to you as a student when you can get those things submitted on time, but it's definitely not uncommon, and there's absolutely no judgment. It's an adult course. Like PACE is whatever, adult something education. So it's like we expect students to have lives and things get in the way, and medical issues and kids and disasters and stuff like that. So yeah, that's why we don't we don't penalize on lateness. I mean, it's not like college students in their 20s don't have issues too, of course, but it's just not in our in it to penalize students for submitting late. It does help to stay on track as much as you can, but you can absolutely use the break to catch up. So
I think I could feel guilty because I'm teaching some of those college students in their 20s.
Oh, are you?
Right. So I'm kind of,
Patricia, I'm sorry to hear about mudslides, building tilting. That sounds scary. Yeah. Sorry, Catherine, did I interrupt you?
Yeah.
There's a bit of a lag in Cat share, and I just caught a word after I finished talking, so I thought maybe I didn't interrupt. Okay. Does anybody else want to chime in, or should I just jump into going over the upcoming lesson? No, okay. And I can't see all your faces for whatever reason. I've got you on gallery. Maybe some people don't have their video on, whatever, which is absolutely fine. But if you need to ask a question, just don't hesitate to like unmute yourself and get my attention, or drop a question into the chat or something. So don't be afraid to interrupt me. Okay, so I'm going to do a little screen share. Got to get back to the right window. This one. Okay. I'm looking for a Zoom alternative, so if anyone has good recommendations, let me know. Okay, share screen. Okay, so here we go, microclimates. Yeah, so the next assignment coming up is the microclimates and current zones. So I would say probably, I mean, there's a lot of detail in both sections here. There isn't really a survey section in this assignment. It's basically, and it's not that it's both design, but they are both essentially that kind of like mapping, getting information that's specific to your site. It's not so general. Kind of the overarching advice I would give is make sure that when you've inserted when you're doing your microclimates and your zones, you make sure that you can drop a pin anywhere on the property, with the exception of like where your actual building is. It's fine to like leave that as a zone 0, and not include that in the maps or the microclimates. But make sure that you can hit anywhere on the property, and it's got a designation of a microclimate in the microclimate section and of a zone in the zone section. Because that is actually part of the rubric, and then it gives you an idea of what everything that's going on your property is going to look like. One of the things that I find that I don't actually really care for about the template, and I don't really pick the template apart. I try not to criticize anything, because I know they've put tons and tons of work into this over years. Consistently though, what I have found is that these color designations that they've chosen can get really difficult to discern once they're on the map, especially when they're over your base map and there's other stuff going on. And if they're separated, like this orange and this kind of orangish yellow, to me almost disappear. And when this reddish color becomes transparent, it's very similar to the one below it. So I personally, I like to see more of like kind of a red, like almost like a rainbow, right? So like a red to green spectrum, something that's just got some more distinction to it. And this is especially true if you've got a very shady or a damp spot. Then you could use like a blue and a green and a yellow, an orange and a red. It's completely a personal aesthetic. If you really like these colors and you feel like they stand out fine, that's just fine. I'll work it out for myself. But it is, I find it's nice to make those colors stand out a little bit. So you can just change the color, just right click on it and fill it with a different color. Okay, so then here you're going to be using your base map site. You can use either the grayscale or the color. It's up to you. Often using the grayscale makes it easier to see the zones. So you've got less color from the different elements competing. But again, it's up to you. It's an aesthetic. If your colors for your base map make information clear, that's fine to use. If you do that, include your legend, or you can stick it over here. And then you're just going to choose 5 different plants from your site. So the instructions are like to choose a tree, choose a shrub, try and choose 5 different forms. So they might actually have, let me see. I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, okay, anyway, so yeah, so at least a tree, at least a shrub, or 2 shrubs, 2 trees, and a ground cover. Got somebody else coming in here, but make sure you've got a variety of plants. Now, some of you, especially on a suburban site, may not have an established tree, or if you're in like a desert setting, that's fine. If you don't have it, you don't have it. Work with what you've got. And then just give me a minute while I'm trying to find where. Oh, here we go. Lucia, here we go. I was trying to figure out how to admit Lucia while I was still chatting there. Here she goes. Yes, Jacob, you're caught up. You're just fine. Okay, so try to choose a variety of plants there. So different types of forms. You can follow the instructions here. If it's helpful to include your satellite map underneath, do so. If you can get by with just using base map, personally, I find that comes out a little bit clearer. But of course, you can always look to the examples like here, so you can see they just use their line base map. You can drop a pin anywhere on here and it's going to show you what type of a zone that is, or microclimate, pardon me. And they really expanded this. So they've actually got a pattern. They've got some different colors. So those really stand out. So that just makes something that's helpful, that conveys that information accurately. There's another example here. And again, see, this is where they use the grayscale base map. I think this looks really nice, just having the grayscale with the microclimates in color. So it makes that clear that this is what you're illustrating. Okay. And then of course your information underneath, you've got a map title, project title, your address, coordinates, all the dimensions, an accurate scale, and your compass rose. So pretty straightforward. If it's not, no shade. I feel like I always say, oh, it's pretty straightforward, and that may be straightforward to me because I've gone through this course 7 or 8 times now. So if there are any questions, just let me know. So now what you're going to do with your microclimates is you're going to describe the plants that you've got here. So your scientific name, common name, what the family is. The scientific name, so it starts with the genus and then the species, always goes in italics. It's just a convention in the scientific community that the scientific name is typically given in italics. First word is capitalized, so Rosmarinus officinalis. The first word is capitalized, the second is not. So here you may have, I wonder where they named this for. This shouldn't actually be for. You may have two plants in the same microclimate, in which case that's fine. But typically, like if you can grab one plant from each microclimate, that's ideal. But again, for a small property or for like a very, very simplified desert property, for instance, you may have a hard time actually getting those 5 plants or getting much diversity in terms of form. So I would be surprised if you had a hard time getting 5 plants, period, but you may have a hard time, for instance, getting a tree. Usually there's some kind of shrubs, a grass, a forb, so something like even like a dandelion would be fine here. Okay, and there's some examples, sources down below, nice clear images to fit the table on the right. And then you can see all the names here. So they've got the scientific name, one or the primary common name. So this is why we use scientific names, is because that's not going to vary. Whereas there can be a lot of variation in common names across different genera. So a good example is like a sweet potato. So right here, Ipomea, there's, oh, pardon me. So Ipomea is a relative of the sweet potato. This is actually morning glory. Ipomea batata is one common variety of sweet potato, but there's a Japanese sweet potato, which is, I think it's a Discoidia. It's a different genus entirely. But if you're just using something like yam or sweet potato, it's not helpful because we don't know what species that is. We can't look up like where it's from, what the medicinal uses of the leaves, for instance, are, what the history of it. So here's another example. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's their 5 plants. Here they put the sources right in the table. Absolutely fine. So however you want to lay this out. Okay. Let's see, any questions? Okay. And then here you're going to lay out what each microclimate is. So the name of the microclimate, what the attributes are. So this can just be, you know, this is a full sun, hot and dry, an image of what that looks like on your site. And then describe these different aspects of it. Now, sometimes when you've got like, if you've got a small site, it can feel like the entire thing is full sun all the time. Like, what do you mean, like variation in the microclimate? But with the different height of sun through summer and winter, you might have a little bit of shade cast, say, from your house or from a garden shed. That can create a microclimate even just behind that building. You might have a different wind pattern coming in, so you might think about if there's like a seasonal wind pattern coming in that creates a seasonal microclimate, just, you know, up against the side of a building, or, you know, where it kind of creates a channel of wind through the property, and that creates a particular like hotter, drier, or colder, drier microclimate, things like that. And then here you're going to list existing plants in that particular microclimate, and then different features of it. So that can really vary, but you're basically just looking at your site and finding like what kind of subtle differences there might be there. I have had students just do, if they're really, really stuck, just do northeast, west, south, or northeast, southwest, because that's, you know, the way sun falls. So your southwest is going to be very full sun, all day exposure. Typically your north is going to have more shade, be a bit cooler. And if that's the only way that you can discern different microclimates, that's okay. That's at least a start in understanding how to pattern out your microclimates on the site. So an example here, they only went with 3 microclimates. That's okay. Now this one is quite a different oh, they're actually doing very different. Oh, okay. These diagrams summarize the main features of the plants. I have never seen a student pick up this particular format. If you see it and it's useful to you, you're welcome to, but most commonly this is what we're looking at. And then you get some examples of existing species on site. So this person had, you know, it must have been a larger property because they've obviously got multiple examples of each of these types of growth forms to choose from. So, okay, questions. And then your SWOT analysis. Now this is going to be something like strengths could be, I've got lots of different microclimates on my site. A weakness could be, I'm mostly full sun, or the microclimates really change throughout the year. So it might be really hard. You feel like it's really hard to plan for that because you've got a really strong wind coming through a certain area, or you've got one part that's like a really shady part of the year and then full sun the rest of it. So that can be, you know, a bit tricky to plan around, things like that. Any particular threats. Yeah, if you've got like a white building reflecting onto like a full sun surface, that can create a lot of kind of radiation and basically a baking effect. That might be something to consider. I struggle, the word threat is kind of, it feels a little more ominous, but maybe something like there's a really wet, boggy spot that just tends to get like waterlogged and kind of anoxic, and that can be difficult to design around, because you can look at that as like a weakness or potentially a threat. And then some opportunities from those different sites. Like sometimes people will highlight like a really wet shady microclimate is actually a really good opportunity for growing some mushrooms, or for cultivating some shade-loving plants, or putting in a germination area where they have more control over the amount of sun exposure it gets. Okay.
Susan, I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
I feel like I become a bit redundant on my SWOT analyses. Is
Mhm.
that okay? Because so my property, it's larger, it's 5 acres, and I'm in the middle of the Sonoran Desert. So the obvious things that recur are heat and wind and flooding for me. So is that okay that that keeps popping up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, this is a really good question to bring up, especially, you know, as we're kind of, this is at one spot where this can show up of like, oh, I've already talked about these before. When it's very common to have, especially in this group, because we're, you know, I get students from Southwestern US and like from drier, semi-arid climates, kind of southern part of the world. So fire, flooding, like seasonal flooding, so like flash flood risks, wildfire risks, you know, extreme drought, you know, high sun exposure are all things that we see pop up really, really frequently. And one way to look at that is that if something is coming up repeatedly, it's, you know, it's going to be something that you're going to have to design around, and really, like, that's going to be a very high priority when you're making design decisions. It'll be like the first thing that you want to make sure you ameliorate, or the first thing that you consider when you're making plant choices. Now, other parts of the world, like where I grew up in the interior rainforest in British Columbia, I mean, 20 years ago, we were like, you could design around wildfire risk if you wanted to. It wasn't a huge concern. Now that's definitely changed, but at that point, our concerns were more like waterlogging, you know, damage from deep snow loads on young trees, deer browse, stuff like that, like, you know, predator risks to our livestock. So we're designing around different strengths and weaknesses that would have similarly been like recurring. We would have had to design around those because they affect multiple different aspects of our design. Does that help?
That is so helpful because and those things are definitely my initial focus, but I was just feeling that as opposed to seeing it as a continuous insight, I felt like I was just repeating myself. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can sympathize with that. It does feel like you kind of like you're playing a broken record. But that's fine. That's just that it's an important thing. And this is one of the values of highlighting the opportunities, especially, is that the fact that this wheel keeps going around of like wildfire risk and drought and all that, you know, the stuff that keeps coming up, you do start to recognize different opportunities when you're looking at it through these different lenses. So like microclimates, when you look through the lens of your water layer, when you look like your water analysis, you might find opportunities of like, I didn't actually realize how much rainfall this site is actually capturing. That's one of the most common comments I get back, is like, I had no idea we were actually collecting like tens of thousands of gallons, or had the capacity to collect that much water off of this single roof. So continually going through that cycle, but looking at it from different, you know, different aspects of the different assignments tends to highlight things that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise notice. So,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so next up is going to be your current zones. Now I've watched the video for the zones, you know, the zones mapping. It's pretty straightforward. It's really just based on how often you use a particular area. Now, when Andrew explains it, as he explains in the video, you're not necessarily going to wind up with nice concentric rings of like, here's my house, here's zone 1, here's zone 2, here's zone 3, you know, zone 4, and then zone 5 is wilderness. You're likely going to end up with, like, often zone 1 is around a front door or around a back patio that you use a lot. But then adjacent to it, there's actually a zone 3 where there's this like storage corner that you don't actually use very much. And keep in mind that this is current zone, so this isn't what could possibly be there. This is like, how do you use this space right now? How often do you visit that space? And then later in the design process, in the course, we're going to get into how do you want to use that space. So could you open that storage space up and create like a nice seating area or some garden beds or something else? But this is the place for just what exists there right now and how do you use it? No, for folks on smaller sites, the zone 5 can actually be right off of your property, even zone 4 to a certain extent, but for the most part, zone 5 can be something like a nearby open space or a park, a riparian zone, somewhere that you can go and be like, oh, this is where like humans aren't really mucking around with it, or it's largely like a preserved area. Ideally, if you can actually go and see patterns of native vegetation, ecological succession, like how things are coming back post-fire, for instance, or after a flood, are good examples. Now, there's certainly justification for taking a little bit of issue with the zone 5 of where it's essentially like humans hands off, nature left to its own devices, because we know from all around the world that for tens of thousands of years and more probably, I mean, humans have been directly involved in managing and even creating landscapes. I mean, this is true from the Amazon basin. It's certainly true from California if you've read any of MCAT Anderson's work. I just want to say that I've noted your question in the chat, and I'm sorry I didn't get back to it when you saw it. I just saw your question again. So we'll circle back to it in a minute, I promise. But the zone 5 is really like, where can you go to look at nature that hasn't been obviously manipulated into something else, like into an orchard or into gardens, into housing, that sort of thing. We do know that humans have managed landscapes for many, many thousands of years. So I've kind of always struggled with this zone 5 because like, I don't know that there is a space that we really want to say like, okay, we're absolutely not going to touch that and leave it to its own devices. So just to preface that, I know that that comes up sometimes for folks, and I recognize it and I value it, and the zone 5 is essentially like, where would you go that feels like a natural, unmanipulated space? So it may not be completely unmanaged, like there may be some, you know, even like some like grazing or something, but something that you can go and see where it's not like actively developed or actively manipulated on a regular basis. Now, if you want to do a second map or like an inset with, say, like, this is where the design site is, this is where the park, or this is like the entrance to, for instance, the Los Padres National Forest, for us in like the LA basin, LA area. You could put that like, this is my zone 5. Some students do that. Some will just make mention of like, my zone 5 is this area that's like 12 miles away that I can go to. It's up to you, but it doesn't necessarily have to be on your site, and it doesn't necessarily have to be omitted altogether. Okay. Any questions on zones?
I think that all of mine has just been undisturbed for like, since they put in the road, but then a couple hundred years it's been the same. It's just a dirt road.
Yeah. So is there any spot where like, if you go there, you would park? Like, is there an obvious?
Not even, no, there's like a
Okay.
road that passes along the edge and one that passes through a third of it.
Yeah.
And then zilch.
Okay. Then that would be like your zone. I mean, if you go out there, what, monthly, you said?
I haven't been there. I mean, I got like satellite maps. I'm having to do it all remote for the most part.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess in that case, you know, you could put your zone 4 maybe as your roads, and then the rest is like zone 5. I mean, and you can explain the context, like, so much.
Can I fast forward a little bit as if I've got part of my design already in? Like, I could fast forward to where I got my buildings in and where their parking is going to be.
I would hesitate to do that because that's really something you get into in like the proposed zones or like the ideal plan.
Okay.
If you wanted to drop in like, you know, dotted lines, or just like kind of go through the exercise, like, hey, if I was driving up this road, I think I would probably park here or something. Or yeah, you could dot it in, something like that. I like to tell students that like, you're telling the story of a property. or a piece of, you're telling the story of a site, right, of a landscape. So if you don't have that connection with it right now, then just tell us how it is, and then you're going to get the chance to tell us how it's going to be or how you're going to influence that. So this may be a super easy assignment for you. Like, you know, you don't have to go into a bunch of complex mapping here, because you will later on when you're doing like proposed zones and stuff.
Mine's gonna get complex later. That water one's gonna be very everything for mine.
Yeah, okay. The other thing is that you may find elements as you go through that you're like, oh, I proposed my building site here. And often this is constrained, right? If there's like utilities or if there's anything, you know, really on site, but you know, if you go down that route of like proposing something now and then you find out you want to change it later, it's like, yeah, you're not really working with what is actually there. So but I'll leave that to your discretion. You've also done a lot of like design and install work, so if you want to make it so it's useful to you. But typically, yeah, we are just starting with like, okay, what's there, and sometimes it's basically a blank canvas. You know, so then you can have, you know, you get an extra hour of sleep or whatever for an hour of work doing something else or whatever. You know, everybody's got kind of like easier and more challenging parts of the course, and for you, those of you with a blank slate, this is like this can be a particularly easy part of the course because there's nothing there, and that's just what it is. So
I'll take that. I could use another hour on these commercial bids I've been doing every day.
yeah, I was gonna say, there you
Staring
go.
at other people's landscape plans all day long.
Yeah, okay. There you go. Okay, and then, oh, so this is going to be the same thing as with the microclimates. Drop a pin anywhere and it should tell me what zone that is, with the exception of your house. But yeah, same rule applies. Scale, all the information, compass rose. I'm going to do a quick check on the rubric in case I missed anything, but it's pretty much just follow the steps. Yep. Okay. And then SWOT analysis, same applies, and then any questions for me. And that's it. Oh, okay, Lucia, let's follow up on your question. So can I add all plants and trees I already planted besides the native plants? Yes, you can. When you get to assignment 7, wait, there's a local ecology survey. There's like cross section. You are going to have more of an opportunity. Oh no, this is not. It's a plant survey. That's what it is. This is where you're really going to describe what your native species are on the site, or you know that you have. Sorry, that's a nursery. So yeah, go ahead and choose sites that are of interest, or choose plants that are of interest to you, or kind of major players on your site right now, and they do not have to be exclusively native. So it's up to you. You will get a chance to detail like what native plants are on your site otherwise, so if you have them. Okay, does that answer your question? Or does that help? Is she still here? Oh, I think she was on her phone, so maybe thumbs up. Okay, are there any questions? I could also scoot forward and look at the water survey. Well, I mean, I'll do that on the next call too, but I can give you a kind of preview of stuff coming up, or what would be helpful.
Okay, so I do have a question on this week's assignment. So looking at the different zones, and you said, okay, so you drop a pin wherever. I guess, okay, so if it was a little bit tricky for me to figure out exactly what the microclimates were, but like during the winter, so it's really hot and dry during the summer, except for where they irrigate, but then it's really during the winter, if there's snow cover, then it's still moist. So do we just kind of identify what is causing it to be moist, or do we say what it'd be like without the extra hands-on kind of a thing?
Yeah, so can I bring your assignment up?
Yeah.
Copy, okay.
I mean, I've been working on it. There's still some more things to tweak, obviously, now that I've listened to this presentation. So
ooh, yay, I'm glad it's helpful. Okay.
Let's see.
Okay, well, that's pretty. Oh, I love those barn. Is this your property?
No, this is the farm that I'm doing it for somebody.
Oh, right, yeah, the farm. I love those barn doors. Those are gorgeous. Okay, so okay, this is perfect. So,
I
yeah.
tried to find plants that were in different areas so that, so I could identify them in the different zones.
Mhm.
But some of the trees, because they water, they irrigate from the canal. He said he didn't plant any of these trees. They're just ones that just came down the canal and he let them stay.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so now, yeah, they've got, but except he planted like the hostas, but that's definitely a microclimate because those don't typically grow unless you put them there.
Mhm.
So I treated them as their own, their
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense to me because like cottonwood's a prolific seed producer. Like they're, carried well by wind and water. Siberian elm, I'm not sure. I haven't seen how it like flowers and sets seeds. I know mulberry is like, produces mountains and mountains of fruit.
Oh,
They're
elms
really
go
attractive to birds.
everywhere.
So yeah, and
I'm
like,
always pulling elms out of the ground because they just spread
yeah.
terribly.
So what, I mean, I like the way you've done it here. The other thing is you can flip that and like call the microclimate by how it is. So you've got a wooded, shady, cool microclimate, which is, dominated by trees and understory. You've got a partial sun, dry soil, exposed microclimate, which happens to be the raised area of the root cellar. That's typically how I would see this arranged. But I'm thinking of like kind of the difference between like irrigated pasture and non-irrigated pasture. So you might have like a large area that is full sun and part of that is irrigated. So then you've got like an irrigated a full sun irrigated and a full sun non-irrigated. And
Oh,
how you could differentiate those two microclimates because one is definitely going to be damper, cooler, just as an aspect of being
okay.
irrigated. And that's fine.
Okay. And that's what I think identified on the next one where it's like the plant or the, maybe not that one. Let's see. Maybe it's the last one, 60. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Oh yeah, yeah. So make the names of these microclimates match
Okay.
these.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you can color match this too.
Yeah, those all color match the same zone. I mean, the same microclimate. Those trees are all,
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. And then it's the plant number. I got you. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mostly did I did a lot of trees just because they don't plant really much anything else. I mean, there's very few plants that they've got in there besides these trees and then just the ground cover.
What's the ground cover?
Bishop's weed and then the hosta is the other fills in understory.
Okay. Okay.
So
Do you have any shrubs?
there are
So-
some. I could change out one of the trees and put in they have
Yeah.
a privet hedge around the,
Oh, there you go.
and then they
Okay.
have a Rose of Sharon that's in the front.
Okay.
So I could change out one of those and put a shrub.
Yeah, I
And
would swap out one of those. I think probably the Siberian elm.
okay.
Oh, you didn't put, yeah. Most of these are non-native. I don't, yeah. So, whichever. Yeah, I would swap out one and put in one of the shrubs, and then you're good. You've got a ground cover, a tree, and a shrub, and that'll be fine. So, okay. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
I had a question when it came to it was telling me on the microclimates the temperature and all that whole page where it's like each microclimate's temperature, summer, winter, all of those things. And I've got zero, like I've got historic data, but
Mhm.
like I got zero idea what the temperature is going to be you
Okay.
know, like in the shade versus on the plateau versus on the slope. And I went
Mhm.
ahead and threw my buildings' roofs in as their own microclimate, even though the buildings aren't there. But like, I don't know what those I mean, I can make like
Right.
guesses on some stuff on just like how temperatures can vary for those temperatures, but I don't know what else to
Mhm.
do.
I think I would just go ahead, yeah, go ahead with that with your best guess. Are you planning to go out there to get soil samples, or do you have somebody else doing that for you for the soil assignment?
I've grabbed some soil samples from nearby. Um,
Okay.
being I don't own this property or anything, I just picked something that I thought would be really beneficial to design on, and it's obviously turned into an entire multitude of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Um, I'm gonna try to go out there and fly my drone and take a lot more shots and
Mm.
do that, but yeah, we'll see.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if that's all you've got, I mean, take your best guess. I mean, if you've got a high ridge, the north face of that is probably going to be shadier, cooler microclimate, something like that. So,
And I've
Susan,
definitely identified stuff, even if it doesn't perfectly exist, and just based on the numbers and elevations and everything I've put in.
yeah,
I'm just also like one of the companies I work for, if I go to do their designs, a lot of it you don't get to see the property on site, the whole
yeah,
process. So I've not been too scared of that process.
that's good. Yeah. Um, Also keep in mind, I mean, when we're talking temperature, it doesn't need to be like, a range of 47 to 62 degrees. It can be, it's cooler, or it's hotter. It's pretty general. So
Okay.
we expect to see that. That's fine.
Susan, when we get to the soil, I'm sorry to jump ahead, but since you started this question,
Um,
when we get to the soil samples portion of it, are we talking about like identifying organic matter or just types of soils or?
all of the above. Okay, but it's well supported, don't worry. So when you get into the soil, so you'll go into the if you're in the US, you'll go into the US,
Yeah,
pardon me?
the soil survey.
Yeah, the web soil survey. Now it's trickier if you're not, and it just is going to depend on the country what soil data is. Um, and I know we've got some resources for different countries or different parts of the world for soil. You may also just end up just looking at it and just doing the field test. So the web soil survey will give you all this like nitpicky data of the profile, drainage, depth, hydric soil rating, stuff like that. But then you're just going to start mapping like where you took your soil tests or your soil samples. 3 sites that are relatively different, so you can see different patterns, and then you're going to do one of these for each one of those samples. So you can really elucidate a lot of that information about your soil just from getting it wet and like running it through your hand and doing what we call a ribbon test, which is where you push it out with your thumb until it breaks, and where it breaks, like if it's a 1 inch, if it's 2 or 3 inches, it actually tells you a lot about what your soil, your clay and your sand content is. And then you'll also do like a ball, and that gives you, kind of helps confirm that information. And then you'll do percolation test, and when you do, and then you do a jar test. So you take some of that soil, you can put in like a drop of detergent, you mix it up with water, and then you let it settle out, and it'll show you. There's videos on like walking you through the process, but it'll show you, by percentage how much clay, how much silt, how much sand you've got, and then you can choose that on the triangle here, like on the diagram.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that I didn't need to be thinking ahead towards actual like lab testing.
Yeah.
I've played around with each of those in a different setting, not on this
Hmm.
property. So and then do we need to know anything? And I hope I'm not jumping too far ahead for everybody else, but I like in the desert, caliche is a big issue.
I'm
And
sorry, which is a big issue?
caliche, it's
Yeah.
like clay that became rock.
Yeah,
Right.
caliche.
I'm not actually sure, and it could be very different across my acreage, how deep that is. And obviously it influences percolation. So would we just be going with percolation, or do we need to know those kinds of things? I'm just curious.
Are you asking if you just need, if So can
Would
you,
we need to know like basically like rates of percolation, or would we want to dig down and figure out where like a layer of clay or caliche is?
oh, I see.
And I'm only asking now because I have a feeling that I want to get ahead of that one.
Yeah.
Possible, just because that's actually really important to me, because I'm building a market farm. So I mean, ultimately, that's what the intention for the property is. So
Sure. So as far as the template, the slides go, there is just a percolation test, but it's very helpful, you know, if you know that cliche, that layer is there, you know, figure out where it is. I mean, how far can you, like, you know, dig down? If it's below the organic layer, you know, how far do you dig down before you hit it? If it's like sitting right on top, how deep is it when you like smash through it? If you know, or like what extent of that, you know, of your property does it cover? Like, you can describe that in different ways, but certainly, yeah, certainly adding information on that is helpful. But because it's not an issue that I would say most students deal with, then it's not included here, but you could put it into like the visual description of the soil pit. You know,
okay.
there's a layer there. You could also put it into like, here, like why you're testing it there, like you wanted to specifically investigate like what, you know, what the characteristics of this, you know, caliche layer or the extent of it are,
Okay.
something like that. So
Okay, I appreciate that, because flooding is an issue during monsoon season for me. And
yeah.
so that's obviously going to be a potential contributor. So perfect. I just want to get ahead of some of the actual hands-on digging in, doing that. So
Sure.
even though I'm behind on other things.
Yeah, no, that's a good one to get ahead of too. So especially with heavy clay soils, they can really take a while to settle out, like a few days.
Yeah,
So
those jar tests do take a while. I would agree with that.
yeah, and um yeah, they take a while to settle out, and it, you know, your results can be kind of hard to read. So sometimes students want to like redo it just to make sure they did it right. And yeah, so that's nice. That's a good thing. That's a good one to get ahead of, actually. So
Thank you.
okay. While we're on the topic of like jumping ahead, if you do wind up jumping ahead, and this is for anyone watching the replay as well, with the watershed assignment, if you need help getting topographic maps of your site, let me know. This one, partly because I've noted the contour map generator has not been working for everyone, and generally I find better topographic maps through other channels. I know the folks behind the contour map generator, and I think their hearts are in the right places, and they've got lots of knowledge, but it's a very aggregated data set, so I don't really trust the lines that come out of that anyway. And you can typically find pretty good topographic maps from like All Trails, for instance, like a hiking company, from Onyx Maps or Onyx Hunt is one. Another software that I use, so it's actually a hunting app, and you can sometimes get topographic maps from there. Avenza Maps has a lot of topo maps, so it kind of depends where you are, like what happens to be available for that part of your world. Some of us have LiDAR data to access if you know how to work with that, and most counties will have like a county GIS database. So yeah, if you're having trouble finding topo map, let me know. Don't get hung up on the contour map generator if it's not working for you. I mean, that is definitely jumping ahead, but I just wanted to put that out here. This practice sheet is basically, so you need to keep this in your presentation. It's basically to show us that you know how to read a topo map, which sounds kind of dead simple. And it kind of is, and topo maps can also be notoriously tricky. So there's some saddles in here that you'll want to identify, identifying the proper like flow of water, that sort of thing. So this is a good practice thing. And the reason that we leave the practice sheet in, it's only worth 1 mark, but it means that we can compare like one student, like not compare one student to the next, but that's kind of exactly what I mean, and make sure that everyone's, you know, literally and figuratively on the same page with understanding how a topographic map works and what it says about the way that water flows across that landscape. So the water analysis assignment is one of the biggest, probably the biggest in the course, in terms of how challenging it can be for students, because it can be like a lot of information that's unfamiliar. Maybe not for you in particular, but as instructors, we tend to find that this one takes more time to work through. But just keep in mind that to keep this practice sheet in your assignment, because it does actually get marked, and then move on to finding maps for your own watershed. Now I'll cover the macro and micro watershed stuff in more detail when we get there. But just keep that in mind, that this worksheet is meant to stay in your presentation. So
what about on that watershed? Like my property is about two acres, and I got the topo map from the city, and it seemed like it was much larger, but still under a square mile. It seems to me that that would be helpful for me to use. And my property would look really tiny inside of it, but or do you want us to be really just keep working with our site size?
that would probably be, so that's like the watershed of a local creek sort of idea.
It's yes.
Okay.
It's a couple creeks and it's hills.
Okay, so do those, you'd want to look, so you're, okay, I mean, I guess I'll be going into this now. So the macro and micro watershed, your micro watershed is basically, another way to term it is like your creek shed. So
okay, the
area around, like the geographic area, and for urban, suburban sites, sometimes you have to like reimagine this as like, what should this have been before everything was like bulldozed and moved around and stuff. But like on a geographic map or picture of the area, what creek, or like what basically what creek shed influences my property. Now that may not even be like the creek flows right past or it's like right through your property. It may be that it flows past, but there's like a drainage into that influences your property, something like that. So it's really like the specific localized creek. It's not just the area right around your property. It's not the area delineated by storm drains and streets and so forth. It's like the geographic area. Now the macro watershed is going to be something like the Santa Ana River, the Santa Clarita River, the river, the system that goes out to the ocean typically, is what the macro watershed is going to be mapping. And usually those types of maps are widely available, in some sort of a government website where they're just, there's some sort of like a watershed action group or like a resource conservation district sometimes have that information, but there's usually like a professionally designated map for the watershed. So that's usually kind of an easy grab, and then you show us where your site is within that location, and that's pretty straightforward. And then the site water flow is really like the water that is going to travel across your property. So that's usually zoomed a lot more in. Usually what happens is I see the site, what should be the site water flow is actually addressed as the micro watershed, and then there's just the macro watershed, but there's nothing really in between that shows that like geographic kind of middle ground, I guess.
All right.
Okay.
Clear.
Okay, and if you have questions, just like send it to me in email or like ask me to take a look, and I'm happy to do that. So I love looking at topo maps. Yeah. Okay, well, we're just about 11:30. We could have one more question. Oh, let me see. Catherine, should we have a fairly comprehensive list of plants per microclimate, or just one representative, or one tree, shrub, ground cover? Typically, like, yeah, one tree, one shrub, ground cover. If you can spread those across your microclimates, that's helpful. So it's kind of a strike a balance. Try not to get them all, hopefully they're not all lumped into one microclimate, but also try to avoid taking like all trees or all grasses or something like that. So it's kind of an interplay depending on what your site specifics are. Does that help, Catherine?
It does. I feel like I was looking at microclimates from what's growing kind of in guilds, like didn't know if you wanted more detail you know, my site is very interesting that way. So, but no, that helps.
Okay, sounds good. All right then.
Can I ask one last
sure.
question?
Yep.
Looking at your critique of another student, you said you suggested they might do mushroom marketing, right, as a crop. And so do you have so if I ask you specific questions, are you the person to ask that in an email?
Yeah, depends on the, yeah, I mean, depends on the questions for mushroom stuff. I mean, that's not personally something I do or have done. So yeah, ask in an email or ask in one of the discussions. Probably asking an email is easiest, and then I know, like, I'll see it. Sometimes I kind of skim over the discussions between you guys, like I see what people are commenting and stuff. But if it's if it's a real specific question you want information on, email it to me. And then if it's information that I think the rest of the group is going to benefit, or I'll put it into like the question resources for that particular assignment or that part of the course.
Fine, thank you.
Okay. And Patricia, I do still have a list from, I think, our previous call of resources that I'm intending to send you.
Great, great.
Yeah, not forgotten.
No, that's great.
Okay. Cool. Well, you guys are all doing great. Thank you for showing up, and well done. Keep going.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Susan.
Bye.